Well, believe it or not, President Biden laughing off, or at least trying to questions today, as to whether he was involved in Hunter Biden's latest text message scandal. Watch.
How involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't, and I don't know.
Were you?
No.
Well, you get a little testy at the end there, but a new text message released by House Oversight from Hunter to a CEF Chinese energy official. Of course, they're affiliated with the Chinese government, shows otherwise. With me now, let's get right to it with the best of the best, legal expert Jonathan Turley, who joins us now. Jonathan, great to see you. You know, the president tries to laugh this off, but the evidence just keeps mounting and mounting, and these texts are the gift that never stops giving. I mean, the stuff that's coming out of these texts, these WhatsApp texts from Hunter are just extraordinary. Here's one, just a tidbit of one. He tells his Chinese partner, the Bidens are the best I know at doing exactly what the chairman wants from this partnership. Do we know what the chairman wanted from the partnership? Will we ever find that out, Jonathan?
Well, the Bidens are the best at this, and what this is corruption. The Bidens have long been accused of influence peddling, of selling access, and they're very good at it. And what these records indicate is that this may have generated millions in influence peddling proceeds. So no, we don't have the specific demand, but this follows a pattern. And the president's response, David, is really quite maddening. I mean, we're talking about a very serious matter here. We're talking about whether his family sold out the country by engaging in this form of corruption. It doesn't matter whether his sons would be charged with a crime or whether he'll be charged with a crime. It's corrupt. That's what influence peddling is. Yeah. It's the favorite form of corruption in Washington.
Well, it's corrupt, and it's also, by the way, beyond the corruption itself, there's the problem of a cover-up. It does look more and more like the DOJ was involved in diverting investigators from getting to the truth of all this.
Right. We have now very clear contradictions of the Attorney General in what he has said to Congress and to the public as recently as a few days ago. He maintained that there was no effort by Weiss to seek an indictment that was blocked by the Department of Justice. Even newspapers like the New York Times have now said that they have confirmed that occurred, that Weiss wanted to bring charges in California and in Washington, D.C., and was rebuffed. Now, all of this is very serious.
I would, by the way, I would call that obstruction of justice, wouldn't you?
Well, you know, when you get to the actual elements of obstruction, it's hard to make that out with prosecutorial discretion. But that's the reason why pigeonholing this in a particular crime is in some ways an effort to evade the question of corruption itself. I think there may be crimes here. And you're right, David. Usually the crimes from influence peddling deal with the concealment of the influence peddling because the public doesn't like it. Yes. And that can involve taxes, that can involve false statements, and that can involve obstruction. It does not appear that the full extent of this corruption was investigated by the Justice Department. Yeah. And when officials attempted to delve further into it, they say that they were prevented from doing so.
And Jonathan, despite all of the mounting evidence and the questions about obstructions, et cetera, the White House, after the charges, those minor charges were filed last week, seems to think that its business is normal. And Hunter, I don't know if you could see, but we had video, maybe we could put it back up, of Hunter Biden at the White House state dinner, who, by the way, was sharing a glass with I don't know if he was sharing a glass, but at least he shared the dinner table with the AG himself. There was Merrick Garland, a guy who was accused of having had something to do with obstructing the investigation into his case. Then he had also news that Hunter Biden was at Camp David, which is kind of a sacrosanct place to be, particularly for somebody who's just been charged with crimes.
Well, David, what people don't realize is that this was a celebratory moment, not just for the Bidens. You know, Hunter got away with it. The Bidens got away with it. It was a point of celebration. His appearing at that dinner really conveyed to everyone that influence peddling is a cottage industry in Washington, and it's going strong. That even with this level of damning evidence and the seriousness of these allegations, it still didn't involve anything other than a couple of minor misdemeanors.
And by the way, visitor logs are now being scrubbed as well from Hunter's attendance. It's extraordinary that they're going the distance as if people aren't watching what's going on. You know, then there's the attempt, and you wrote about this earlier in the week, the attempt to paint Hunter and the president as somehow victims in all this, as though Hunter's addiction to drugs and prostitutes excuses him for years of criminal behavior. I mean, and it's not just the White House saying this, it's actually members of the media.
Right, and it's really implausible because they keep on portraying this as like he was panhandling in Times Square. He was at the center of a complex system of dozens of LLCs and bank accounts shifting millions of dollars internationally through an influence peddling scheme. That's not the profile of some junkie trying to get money for his habit. Yeah. It's the profile of a champion level form of influence peddling.
Jonathan, finally, I have to harken back to when you and I first met, which was during the Bill Clinton impeachment period for Whitewater. Mm-hmm. That's how far back you and I go. But I'm just wondering, do you think that we have now reached at least the threshold for impeachment that we saw for the Clinton impeachment?
I think the key here is that we are well past the threshold for oversight investigations and the possibility of impeachable offenses. You can't deny that. There are false statements here that have to be explored. And so oversight committees have every right to delve into these issues, and I think courts will support them. At this point, the power of Congress to investigate this matter is at its apex. There are criminal and potentially impeachable matters involved, and they can move this aggressively and quickly, in my view.
Jonathan Turley, great to see you, and I'm proud to have known you for that long a period of time. You've helped me out all the way. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Jonathan.
David.
Appreciate it.